Hi guys, for this video lesson, we're going to discuss simple and compound propositions under your General Mathematics from Quarter 2, Module 14. I'm your subject teacher, Arvin S. Enriquez. Our lesson objectives. At the end of this video lesson, you are expected to define simple and compound propositions and distinguish between simple and compound propositions. Let's go now with your simple and your compound propositions. So far, you have initial knowledge of propositions already through your module 13. Yes, it is no. We define your propositions. We determine some of the given statements, if they are propositions or not. By definition, we define your proposition as a declarative sentence or a statement that can be true or false but not at the same time. That can be true or false and false, I mean. So I mean to say, if the proposition is a true statement, the truth value is also true. Meaning to say that the truth value of a proposition will be dependent if this proposition is a true statement. Again, the truth value of a proposition will be dependent if the proposition is true or a false statement. So at this point, you may want to know more about propositions. To start with, propositions may be divided into two big groups: your simple propositions and your compound propositions. So in this lesson, you are expected to demonstrate an understanding of key concepts of simple and your compound propositions. You should also be able to distinguish one from the other. Yes, it is no. This module will provide us a clear vision on what are the concepts that these simple and compound propositions can bring to us. So, entirely this module is all about the concepts of your simple and your compound propositions. Before we formally start with our discussion for this module 13, which is about your simple and your compound propositions, let's deal with this what's in activity. So first, let us review what you have learned in the previous module. So answer the following with all confidence. Your task now is to identify each statement below as a simple sentence or compound sentence, and you need to write S if it a simple sentence. If the given is simple sentence, you need to write S, and if the given is a compound sentence, you need to write C. So if it is a compound sentence, you need to identify the conjunction used as well. So here, there are 5 sentences being given to us, and you need to identify them if they will fall under your simple sentence or your compound sentence. Now, before moving with that task, let's recall now what is a simple and your compound sentences. So basically, your simple sentence contains one independent clause. So we define, or we can say that simple sentence contains one independent clause. A compound sentence, on the other hand, no, it contains more than one. Put another way, so we can put this in another way, that a simple sentence contains a subject and a predicate, but a compound sentence contains more than one subject and more than one predicate. So as you can see here, our task is to identify or to determine if the given sentences will fall under your simple sentence or compound sentence. Now, if they will fall under your compound sentence, then you need to identify next the conjunction use as well. So what are those conjunctions? So it can be not, but, if then, if and only if, and other conjunctions available for us to use. Now, it's your task now for you to identify if this sentence or sentences being given to us will fall under your simple and or your compound sentence. Now, let's move forward with the what's new. So we're asked now to read the famous poem Below by Rudyard Kipling, so an Indian short story writer, poet, and novelist. So see the wisdom in this poet. So there's a title here, If, again by Rudyard Kipling. So again, we're going to read the famous poem by Rudyard Kipling. So if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumphs and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you have spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to, broken, and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and raise it on one turn of pitch and toes, and lose and start again of your beginnings and never breath a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can feel the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you will be a man, my son. So that's the great poem of a good Indian poet, novelist, no, and a writer, which is your Mr. Kipling. So by this poem, we can now answer the following: do you like it? So there's a question here. Do you like it? So what is the most striking line of the poem for you? Can you spot and identify as many propositions as you can in the poem? So using this poem, we can identify, no, you can identify as many propositions as you can in this poem, and you can see many of the conjunction used, no, in this poem. The if, not, no, the if then, the if and only if. So those are the conjunction being used on this uh, poem. So we can identify, because we can pinpoint some of the propositions, as many as we can. Using this poem, we can review now again the concept of your propositions, because there are lots of real talks here in this poem. So we can see, or we can identify them if these propositions are true or not, and what is the most striking line of the poem for you. Because sometimes, or most of the time, propositions are striking lines. No, it can affect the way we see things. It can affect our perceptions. But the thing is, what is the truth value of these propositions? And that will be our main agenda for this what's in activity. No, moving forward with this, what is it? So your simple and your compound proposition defined. So we're going to define your simple and your compound propositions. Now, dealing with your simple propositions, when we say simple proposition, is a proposition that cannot be broken down into more than one proposition. Why is that it happened? No? Your simple propositions are declarative sentences. We can say that these simple propositions are declarative sentences which do not contain a connective. What are those connective or connectors? Those are not, and, or, the if then. Those are logical connectors for us to combine two simple propositions. But again, when we define simple proposition, it is only a proposition that cannot be broken. Why is that it happened? Because it it does not contain any connectives. So those are logical connectors. Meaning to say this is a single declarative sentence without using your and, not, or, if then. So it is a simple sentence, should I say, no, that can be true or false. A simple sentence, a statement that can be true or false, but not at the same time, without using any logical connectors. That will be your simple proposition. Otherwise, it is a compound proposition. So the latter is a proposition that is formed by joining simple propositions using logical connectors. Yes, it is, no? That is your compound proposition. So we just simply combine two simple propositions using your logical connectors, and the resulting proposition will be your compound proposition. Here, as you can see here, given propositions P and Q, P that will be your first proposition, and or your Q that will serve as your second proposition. Some logical connectors may be expressed in terms of the following. As you can see here, there is a not here as your logical connector, I mean, the and, the or, and the if then. As you can see, these are logical connectors. And there's a if and only if. To our next module, we're going to see on how we use this one and what will be the uh, representation of this one. No, your and can be aligned to your conjunction, your or is for your disjunction, your not is for your negation, the if then for your conditional, and the if and only if for your biconditional. So there is uh, these logical connectors, each of the logical connectors has the representation, no, of this one. So there's an alignment for your conjunction, disjunction, negation, conditional, and biconditional. So simply use this one, these logical connectors, to represent those, no, conjunction, disjunction, negation, conditional, and biconditional. So again, your simple proposition is a proposition that we can say that these are declarative sentences which do not have contain a connective. That's why it is a proposition that cannot be broken because it is a single proposition, while your compound proposition is a combination of two or more simple proposition with the use of your logical connectors. So we combine two or more simple propositions using logical connectors, and whatever the resulting sentence or proposition, in that case, that will be your compound proposition. So for example number one, so in the previous module, we have understood that the following are propositions. This time, let us identify each of these as simple or compound proposition. So for number one, as you can see, there is no logical connectors that we use. So for number one, grounding is beneficial to a person. It is a single proposition. So there is no logical connectors that we use, being used, I mean, in this proposition number one, or under your letter A, proposition A. So I mean to say this number one, this proposition under your A is a simple proposition. So it is a simple proposition. For a proposition under your letter D, there is no stronger than the heart of a volunteer. So as you can see, it is a single proposition. So there is no connectors being used on this one. So it's automatic that this proposition under your letter D is again a simple proposition. And for the third proposition under your P, your 3 factorial is equal to 6 over 2, even if this proposition is a false statement, still a proposition, because it can be a true statement. So we define your proposition as a declarative sentence or a statement that's true or false, but not at the same time true or and false. Now, since this one is a proposition that is a false statement, then we consider this 3 factorial is equal to 6 over 2 as a proposition. Again, if we convert this to words, then there is no logical connectors being used. So your proposition under your P is a single proposition. There is no connection, logical connectors used on this one. That's why, again, it is a simple proposition. So your P sub 1 here, as you can see, a proposition under your P sub 1, if an individual is great, then there is a teacher behind. So if we try to observe on this one, there is a logical connector used, and that is your if and then. So meaning to say, this proposition under your A up to your P4, these are all propositions. What we need to do is to define them or identify them if they are under to your simple and your compound proposition. So your proposition under your P sub 1, so by simply assessing the given proposition under your P sub 1, there is a logical connectors there. And that is your if then. So we simply use logical connectors. That's why this P sub 1 is a compound proposition. Now, for your proposition under your P sub 2, either a person saves before spending or one spends before saving. Again, let's assess if there's a given logical connectors used on this proposition under your P sub 2. As we can see, there's an either or here. So that will serve as your logical connectors here in your proposition under your P sub 2. Meaning to say that this proposition P sub 2 here is a compound proposition. Now, for your proposition under your P sub 3 or your P3 proposition, it is not a shame to greet the utility worker the same way as with the school principal. Again, let's try to assess if there is a logical connector used on this proposition under your P sub 3. So again, our logical connectors that we can use is your and, or, not, if, then, and if and only if. In this case, we use not as your logical connector. So again, it's automatic that this proposition under your P sub 3 is a compound proposition. Now, for your proposition under your P sub 4, if a person is disabled, then he or she is entitled to obtain a PWID. And if a person is entitled to obtain a PWID, then he or she is disabled. So we simply use the if-then logical connector here for us to combine two simple propositions. Now, this proposition under your P sub 4 is a compound proposition. Why? Because we use your if-then logical connector. And it's automatic that once we use logical connectors, and if we try to assess if this is the combination of two or more simple propositions with the use of this logical connector, then we can identify that we can say, or we can conclude that this proposition under your P sub 4 is a compound proposition. So that's how we assess, or that's how we identify if the given propositions are under your simple and your compound proposition, by simply assessing if there's a logical connectors being used on this, or if the given is only a single proposition. If there are two or more propositions with the given and there's a use of illogical connectors, or should I say, we use logical connectors to combine or to connect two simple propositions, then we can come up with the idea that the given is a compound proposition. So for your example number 2, let's identify the simple components of the compound propositions in example number 1 and the corresponding symbols using the logical connectors use. So as part of their solutions, so we simply use the propositions under your P sub 1, P sub 2, P sub 3, and P sub 4. Here, there's your proposition P sub 1 to your P sub 4. Then here is the simple components or the simple propositions under this P sub 1 to P sub 4. Then we put we use J and X to represent the first proposition, and X for your second proposition under your P sub 1 in your example number 1. So the propositions with the logical connector or connectors, if J, then X. So we just simply use a variable or a letter here to represent your two propositions being involved in your P sub 1 proposition. If an individual is great, then there is a teacher behind. So that's how we see it, So we just simply use logical connectors or connectors here for us to combine two or more simple component or simple propositions. And for P sub 2, a person saves before spending, and we use O to represent this proposition and K for the second proposition under this P sub 2. So a person saves before spending, or one spends before saving. So we just simply use this logical connector or for us to combine these two, your proposition under your O and K in your proposition P sub 2. Now in your proposition P sub 3 here, So we just simply use not for us to represent the negation or the opposite of the real simple components of this one, no? So for your proposition under your letter C, it is not ashamed to greet the utility worker the same way as with the school principal. So we just simply use logical connector here, not for us to represent, no? Even if there is a single proposition, but if we put a logical connector not, no? It simply makes a compound proposition in a way that you oppose or whatever the resulting sentence or proposition that will be the negation or totally opposite of the original proposition. Once we put not, that will represent your negation. Then your P sub 4 here, we simply use Y to represent the proposition a person is disabled, and C to represent the proposition a person is entitled to obtain a PWID. So we just simply use if then here for us to combine these two propositions under your Y and Z, the if then and if then. So we just simply uh, swapping the locations of these two propositions under your P sub 4, and then we use the logical connectors if then and if then. So for your activity, in the blank before each number, write SP if that is a simple proposition, CP if that is a compound proposition, and N if will fall under not a proposition. So if it is a simple proposition, compound proposition, or not a proposition respectively. So furthermore, identify the logical connector or connectors used if it is a compound proposition. Here there are 10 sentences. Here, you just simply identify first if the given is a proposition or not before moving forward in identifying if the given is a simple or compound proposition. Because you cannot move forward saying or concluding that these given sentences are simple proposition and compound proposition if they are not proposition. First thing to do is to determine or identify if the given sentences are propositions or not. If they are not, then you just put N. If they are propositions now, then you need to identify if they are or they will fall under your simple proposition or compound proposition. And if they are compound proposition, you need to identify the logical connector or connectors used if it is a compound proposition. Again, by simply dealing this activity, first thing to do is to identify if the given statement or sentences are proposition or not. If not, put N. Then you cannot move forward with putting SP and CP because if we only put SP and CP for those statements or sentences that will fall as a proposition. Now, if we identify if the given is a proposition, then we can move forward now in putting SP and CP, which represent your simple proposition and compound proposition. Now, if your answer is a compound proposition, then your next task is to identify the logical connectors or connectors used if it is a compound proposition. So that's simple. It is, no? So you can put all your answers in your Katleya notebook and you can pass this on the announced deadline, no, for these outputs. So thanks for watching. So please like, comment, and share, and subscribe.